Stay cool and choose from over 40 in-stock ceiling fans for under $100, plus an 11% rebate at Menards. We carry the largest selection of in-stock Hunter ceiling fans, available in a variety of designs, finishes, and features. Create the perfect look and lighting for any room with a new Hunter ceiling fan. Visit Menards.com and view our entire selection of Hunter ceiling fans, plus the weekly flyer and other great deals going on now.
Save big money at Menards.
We're excited to announce that our very own podcasting platform, Zencastr, has become a new sponsor to the show. Check out the podcast discount link in our show notes and stay tuned for why we love using Zen for the podcast.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Welcome to Heritage Voices, episode 34. I'm Jessica Yaquinto, and I'll be your host today. And today we're talking about planting seeds for transformation in cultural heritage management. Before we begin, I'd like to honor and acknowledge that we're recording this episode in Mancos, Colorado, on new treaty lands, as well as the ancestral Puebloan homeland and part of the Dinétah. So to get us started, we have a bit of a group episode today, so we're going to go one by one and introduce ourselves.
My name is Genevieve Carey. I'm a community archaeologist from Montana with working for Applied Archaeology International.
Kaya, that's hello in our language. My name is Iszaac Webb, or Zach Webb. I'm a Wadandi man, Marman from the southwest corner of Western Australia. I work with my communities in community archaeology and working with the elders on cultural preservation and heritage management.
G'day, my name's Dave Guilfoyle. I'm a US-Australian community archaeologist working on a number of projects across the Four Corners, Alaska, and parts of Australia. Doing collaborative community-based heritage preservation projects.
Hello, my name is Tess Lynston. My lineage is the Yampa and Bri Bri tribes. My company is Creations Curations, and a fraction of that is doing cultural appropriation, promotion of Indigenous peoples' artwork, telling their story, and having sustainability through their artwork. And I advocate and educate for cultural appropriation projects and awareness.
Hello, my name is Robert Bearheart. I am an Ojibwa person. I'm also a community archaeologist. I've been working with AAI for the last 3 years now.
And would you mind one of you explaining a little bit more, giving us a little background on AIA, correct? And the acronym as well.
Yeah, so AAI is Applied Archaeology International, and essentially we work, internationally to work under the direction of local elders in developing collaborative projects that they see as their priority based around heritage preservation. And a lot of that sort of model has a local application, obviously, but there's also some aspects of what we do that are quite similar in everywhere we work in terms of how elders want to be engaged and the type of work that they're looking at doing. So we're exploring that, developing the model and setting up a number of projects to basically very practical projects to get on the ground, working around cultural places under cultural protocols, and doing a lot of sort of restoration, preservation work, empowering youth so there's a social outcome to the project, and a lot of environmental work around these places.
Okay, before we switch topics from that, I'm just curious because I know there's a lot of us and a lot of our listeners that are really interested in making that kind of work happen. And so just on a purely practical level, where do you guys get most of your funding for those kinds of projects?
It's mixed. It's definitely a struggle. We write a lot of grants, and the grant writing process is actually part of our model in a way by working from the ground up with communities and spending the time developing project ideas with communities and then looking for funding sources to target those types of projects. But we're also exploring how to make it kind of a sort of an economic model where there is a little bit of a bias in the way archaeology is funded in general. It's very top-heavy with research projects and also sort of commercial archaeology, or what they call in this country cultural resource management. where it's essentially a business and for profit. Whereas we're trying to look at how heritage preservation under community controlled processes can be at the same level of funding and recognised and valued as something that should be resourced. So we're doing a sort of a mixed approach to project development, and that's, you know, writing grants, but also, you know, exploring contracts, collaborative projects that help bring in resources to these types of community projects.
Mm-hmm. And Tess, I imagine that's a similar situation for you with your kind of work with funding.
Yes, absolutely. Mainly just grants and volunteer work, and most of my work has up to this point has not been funded. It's just a calling, to part of healing our lineages, right, and just bringing that awareness about preservation and reverence for Indigenous peoples' culture.
Great. So how did you all meet? How did you all get connected?
Well, for myself, I've worked with Dave in Australia. He approached our community years ago now, and it took a while for him to gain the trust of the community, but eventually we got there on working on various community projects and restoration projects of rock art, petroglyphs, as well as midden sites and tool sites and traditional law areas as well. So we worked across various amounts of projects, and then we've just continued to work right up until today, until I've been invited to come over and assist in the 550 project, but also meet the community, meet the Ute people, also meet the Hopi, and just basically do a cultural exchange, which has been funded by MRBTA, which is the Margaret River Bustle and Tourism Association, that we have a MOU with, which is a Memorandum of Understanding, and we have a 3-year contractual binding agreement. So when this opportunity came up, they said, we'll pay for the tickets, just give us a report and what you've experienced on and how different mechanisms of working with traditional owners and cultural management and all that sort of stuff, and see how we can do that cross-cultural exchange program.
I first met Dave and Jen 3 years ago now, doing a field school. They had worked with the Kainsa Indian tribe, and I kind of grew up doing community-based archaeology programs with them through Sistine Camp. That's how I met up with them and just started working with them through that.
Yeah.
So went over to Zach's country and did some repatriation stuff.
Mm.
So, and that was my second internship, which I had to do the internship and go to the school at the same time. So teaching yourself a lot of the skills and like GIS, a lot of really hard subjects, trying to teach myself that and do really amazing work, like doing repatriation. So awesome, amazing experience.
So where were you at school?
So I went to Salish Kootenai Tribal College, studying tribal historic preservation. It's archaeology and anthropology in a community sense, while also kind of studying how to be a tribal historic preservation officer. So that's my background.
Yeah. So was Aaron Bryn one of your professors?
Yes, Aaron
okay.
Bryn's a good friend of mine.
Okay. He was on the podcast too.
Really?
So. Yes. So I saw that when Dave sent that in the email. I was like, oh, I bet they know each other. Sorry. Okay. Side note. All right. Did anyone else want to go next on how they...
I guess to touch a little bit on that too, I'm just meeting Robert Bobby for the first time. I was actually up in the Pilbara, which is quite a few thousand kilometres away, up north from my traditional lands of the Wadandi people, of the saltwater people. I was actually up in the north working on a community-based ranger program. So we were getting traditional owners trained up in conservation land management, but also how they are directed by their elders under the cultural management guidelines of their management plan for their national park, implementing how they'd like to see their country managed. So at that point in time, Robert came over, got to meet my father and my family, what we call our mort, our family, and helped out to do the repatriation of our old people who had been in the museum in boxes since about the 50s, so the late 1950s, when they were taken out of our burial chambers, our yarling, our cave systems, to open up our region for tourism. So it's now coming over here, getting to meet him for the first time, which is just great, and pay homage and that of being able to, that I wasn't there, but being able to help out my community and elders by doing the repatriation.
Yeah, I guess the way I got involved with this type of work was similar to Bubby. I did a field school down in Australia, and that was at the end of my 4-year undergrad degree as an archaeology student. And I was feeling pretty disillusioned, actually, at the moment, and just felt like something was missing in that type of degree and sort of the academic world in a way. And that's when Dave came along and he gave a talk on the field school and the type of sort of community archaeology that was applied archaeology type stuff that was happening down in Australia. And he was offering a field school. So I went down there, met community. Actually, yeah, the first place I went to was Wadandi country, Iszaac place. And that was it. That's what was missing was people from archaeology. So that was...
This is Tess. So here in the small community of Mancus, we just kind of make friends. But so I would walk in the mornings and I would walk by this home and there was this truck out front and it had Applied Archaeology International. And I was like, ooh, what's that? Yeah. And I remember having mixed feelings and I was like, oh, are these people desecrating, cultural sites? But I just had this lightness about it. So I was like, I have to find out what that is. And so I'd said I was going to go knock on the door one day. And then we happened to be socializing. And I just met Genevieve and David then and heard about their work. And I just remember getting spirit sparks. And part of that was like, I didn't quite understand and still don't how we will be collaborating together. Mm-hmm. But in 2012, I attended the Institute of American Indian Art, and that was guided through my great-grandmother. And I was at a crossroads in my life, and she came to me and she said, it's time to heal our lineage. And I was like, okay, whatever that means. And so it did lead me to the Institute of American Indian Arts, and I studied one of my degrees in Native Arts and Culture Museum Studies. And there's been many experiences where I've not intentionally knowing I was healing my lineage, but then I just trust in that process and realize, okay, this is part of healing our lineages. And so I feel like on a more spiritual level, like just being among these just devoted, maybe heartful people that, were just kindred spirits wanting to restore and remember the reverence for Indigenous peoples' cultures.
So, Tess, there's so many things that I want to touch on that all of you said. I mean, we may end up having to do more than one because, Lord. But how did you get your particular focus on cultural appropriation? And can you talk a little bit more about that?
I was having a bit of what some people call a life crisis. I called it create my canvas path. I was just really asking. I had a holistic wellness practice, and part of holistic wellness is reverence for nature. And there was something that was just kind of pulling me, and I was asking what's next. So I was in Santa Fe studying to be a Kundalini teacher, and I met this woman, and she ended up inviting me to IA, and I went there, and I was waiting to meet with her, and I saw this brochure, and it had an image of pottery on it, and it was very emotional to me because I'd been having dreams of pottery and didn't know what it meant. Mm-hmm. And so I went into her office, and she just said, "Okay, sign here. You're this is where you need to be." So I started taking classes on Native American history, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I was inspired through learning about NAGPRA, the Native American Grave Protection and Repatriation Act. Right. And it was just really disturbing to me. And so, I felt really angry at first, and I didn't quite know what to do with that. It was just all being held in. Right. And then I realized I started writing papers and talking to people, and it was just, I kept praying actually and asking, what am I to do with this information? Mm-hmm. And so it was just something that spiritually evolved. And I've seen how transformative it can be just through educating people. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I credit my great-grandmother in spirit. Yeah.
So I guess that ties in really interestingly with the project that the two of you worked on. And I'm really curious, and I'm sure all of our listeners would be really interested to hear how the situation with repatriation is different between the U.S. and Australia, if anyone feels like they can touch on that a little bit.
I guess I'm just working out and seeing differences but similarities at the moment between our two countries. I'm seeing, say, for the 550 project, for instance, for us, our elders would have been involved right at the beginning of the process. It's a thing which we call in our community ask first. Mm-hmm. So we just say, if you just ask first and ask our elders, usually our grandfathers and kabari grandmothers, they can tell you where cultural significance is. I mean, the whole country is culturally significant. You can't try to separate one part from another. But they can give you guidance and cultural guidance in mitigation so that you're not destroying people's heritage and culture that still lives today. Right. That it's a living culture. It's a living, breathing thing, just like around the country as well. The country is alive and a breathing, living thing that we're all connected to. So it's learning learning these different practices from my country back in Wadandi, Piriloman, Budya, saltwater country, and my grandmother and grandfather's country. And just seeing the similarities and differences here. But I've seen, I guess, a lot of the times as First Nations, as Indigenous people, we don't want to stand in the way or be gatekeepers to stop so-called progress or whatever it might be. But it's just more about, working together so that we can make sure that everyone's cultural safety is okay. So it's much like occupational health and safety. In cultural heritage, we have cultural safety. So the country will punish maybe not us, or it might punish us as the custodians and caretakers for not giving the right advice on how to protect her or look after her. Because we say, you look after Nyara Boya, our mother country, and our mother, you look after your mother, she will look after you. But if you disrespect her, she won't respect you. She won't house you and feed you and all those things. So it's just learning those different ways and and I guess the thing is you shouldn't have to, for us, my belief is take away those things, all those artifacts, those history, and put them into a museum or a box, because that's how I met Bobby, because we were reversing that process, how we met Dave, how we've met together. We're trying to flip that on its head and reverse that way of thinking. And like we say, it's always about ask first. If you ask first and ask the communities, and just always, if you're not getting the answer, go back to the drawing board, go back to the start again. It might be a longer process, but that's just the way it is. And also make sure that it's funded properly. Make sure that when you're talking to your elders and that people are providing a service, so therefore it's a fee for service. So just as you would get a plumber in to unplug your drains or build your house as a carpenter, this is a service that's provided. So there has to be that sort of that funding model as well to make sure that is backed up for community empowerment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I want to reiterate that, how many times I've heard federal agencies or different people be shocked that we plan on paying elders, which in my mind is absolutely absurd, because you would never consider not paying any of your other contractors. And the fact that they'll argue with me over a price that is a quarter of what I've seen some anthropologists charge. So, yes.
It's all a part of healing our lineages. But I wanted to elaborate on what Zach said. I'm Tess speaking. The whole concept of repatriation needs to be redefined. Like, to desecrate sacred lands and sites and the environment and then want credit because you're repatriating it, because the process to repatriate back to the tribes and is, I can't even describe that. It's just ridiculous. But I want repatriation to be to stop doing it. Redefining repatriation.
Right. And did you have anything that you wanted to add about that whole experience?
I mean, it was an amazing, magical experience, but it was kind of refreshing to see the laws that you're studying and the laws that you're, thinking about are being put in practice and in the most beneficial way possible. So like here, the language of the laws is like remarkably similar, but here it's not put into practice like it is over in Australia. Here, there's definitely a disconnect. And, granted, a lot of people don't have ceremonies for reburial because you're not supposed to do that. You're just not supposed to dig up. And, there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. And in my experience, what I've heard and I guess on various projects, over here, it's not really, in the U.S., it's not really done, in my opinion, in the right way, and it's slowly getting to that, but it could, in my opinion, be a lot quicker and faster than it is happening.
So, in your opinion, what would be the right way, or how would you like to see it done?
I guess, from the start, you do have consultation with communities, but a lot of it's kind of like segmented. And, not everyone from the community needs to participate because there's a lot of, I don't want to say taboos, but a lot of do's and don'ts about ancestors and especially remains. I think it should be more community-based because it is a process of healing. And right now it's not as beneficial as it should be.
This is Tess speaking. I would like for changes of, what's taking place and what Applied Archaeology International is doing is consulting with the tribes, but more than just consulting, like their wisdom being implemented.
Chris Webster here for the Archaeology Podcast Network. We strive for high-quality interviews and content so you can find information on any topic in archaeology from around the world. One way we do that is by recording interviews with our hosts and guests located in many parts of the world all at once. We do that through the use of Zencastr. That's Zencastr. Zencastr allows us to record high-quality audio with no stress on the guest. Just send them a link to click on, and that's it. Zencastr does the rest. They even do automatic transcriptions. Check out the link in the show notes for 30% off your first 3 months, or go to zencastr.com and use the code HEVO, HEVO.
America's favorite place to watch football is Stadium Swim, located at Circa Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. Catch all the biggest games at a viewing experience built for sports fans. Chill in one of their 6 pools on 3 different levels for a perfect view of their massive screen. Plenty of seating options from cozy daybeds to private, temperature-controlled cabanas. Stadium Swim. Book your spot today at circalasvegas.com.
Is your vehicle stopping like it should? Does it squeal or grind when you brake? Don't miss out on summer brake deals at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
I know that you guys have been talking a lot with different people about that project. Can you give us a little bit more background on what exactly your guys' role has been and just like some additional background on the project as a whole?
Yeah, so the US 550 project is a Colorado Department of Transportation initiative to expand a section of that highway I guess, for safety reasons, but it does go across a high mesa above the Animas River. I guess our role was engaged as a subcontractor, in essence, to another archaeological firm that was doing the mitigation of that right-of-way where the road is planned to be expanded across private land. Mm-hmm. And as Tess said, a number of ancestral cultural places were located there on the initial surveys, and the mitigation plan that was developed by the Cultural Resource Management Company was to salvage, essentially, excavate those places. The phrase that's sort of used is data recovery. Mm-hmm. So as the mitigation response, our role was to look at like an outreach component to that and talk with cultural leaders, tribal groups, tribal organisations and youth about, their feelings of the project, that stage of the project. Do they want to be involved? Mm-hmm. How would they like to be involved? What are their thoughts on the whole process? Mm-hmm. And it was an interesting journey for us because, there was a lot of sort of feedback that don't really want to be involved at that stage of this project. That it was disturbing as to see sites excavated for a lot of people. There was ancestral human remains, which meant a lot of people didn't want to be out there in that area, and especially youth. So for us, we had to take that information and redesign that sort of engagement process. And what came out of it really was an alternative. They were giving us information about next time do things this way. So we've sort of developed, and they also wanted to do projects as an example of an alternative. So we've been down with Hopi this last week doing a spring restoration project, and way down in Arizona, far from the US 550 corridor. So that's interesting in itself because it's about Hopi educating us, educating that system of saying, we want to do heritage preservation projects ultimately. Right. And this is how we'd like to do it, under elders' guidance, have youth opportunities and fix up places, And in this case, it was a sacred spring. But it's also a message to planners and saying we should be involved at the very first stage of the planning process so that, as Zach was saying, we can help guide that planning process. Right. So our work has evolved in this particular project to develop a case study which it sort of enters the realm of countermapping, as they call it, where a lot of us respond to one plan. So someone puts a plan for a road or a pipeline or a housing estate, and we all scramble to, under federal environmental heritage laws, to respond to that plan. Whereas we look to say, well, that's one plan. Mm-hmm. It may have some good aspects to it, but we go and talk with elders and community and say, what's your plan for this area? Over a 20, 50-year period. Mm-hmm. And if the two plans overlap and they can work together, then great. If there's some conflict, we need to resolve that and look at solutions to doing that. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's how our role now is taking the lessons we've learnt from elders and the clear messages that they've given us about their thoughts and feelings on this particular highway project, and do a sort of an alternative plan which can hopefully be used as a good case study or a model for the next plan, in the next project that comes along. That we don't really respond. We don't want to react to plans. We want to be strategic and have agencies, archaeologists, anthropologists working collaboratively with elders. So how do we foster that type of relationship where we're not reacting to these sort of situations, which is it's difficult to resolve at this late stage. Right. We're at a point now where everything's in place for this development, whereas the elders are telling us, maybe next time let's get us involved from the start.
Right. So just to elaborate on that, a lot of agencies follow guidelines that are in compliance with notifying the tribes of what they're doing. So in place of that, it being more reverent, like instead of complying, like just having reverence of a collaboration and creating a new paradigm in the field of not just archaeology, but in all situations that are cultural appropriate.
So I want to talk a little bit more about this particular road trip that you guys are doing. And, you were starting off doing some work on the 550 project. And this is kind of, it sounds like what got this all going. But what has this experience, like, first of all, can you talk about where you guys actually have been going on this road trip and where you're going to be going, because it's not over, and what that experience has been like for all of you?
Well, for me, I think it's been a great experience. I've enjoyed every second of it since landing here in the US. I think it's great. Getting out, meeting community, had the honour and privilege of meeting some of the Southern Ute and the Ute people. We went out to Ignacio, to the community. We've been around to Canyon of the Ancients. We've been up to Mesa Verde. We've checked out what it's like in a government sense to run a national park through a different perspective and talk about other people's heritage and ancestral belongings and everything. Yeah. To then meet the Hopi, and the Hopi come here, be shown around by them, and then tell stories of their Puebloan ancestry and about kivas and about their ceremonies, and just be immersed into the culture, and then have the honour of being invited down to their boyara, their country as well, and to assist them and their elders on the restoration of a spring. As the old uncles say, like that, is water is life. So to help the country revive and where we can and do those sorts of things and those environmental restoration, heritage sort of projects, and exactly to touch on exactly what Tess saying, just not going in there and destroying. It's more just preservation. We'd much prefer not to do have any of these things unearthed, and just like Bobby was saying the same thing, like there are no ceremonies and things for these sorts of things. So that whole road trip though, coming down and being around the place, and I floated down the Animus as well. So I've got I even went to Walmart as well. So all the different sorts of things. But the cultural aspect of it and meeting the communities has far outweighed everything and anything that I would have ever expected. Yeah. So for me, I just feel honoured and privileged that in our language we say, like I say, that a nika bara nyanan boyara. So nyari boyara. So I pay respects and homage to the elders past, present, and to the emerging next leaders for allowing me to nyanan, to sit, stop and rest upon their boyara, on their country, and to tankania wangai. So my ears are listening to their stories.
And I think, like we have a team that we've formed deliberately that's now international, and there is a strategy here is to form sort of an operation that provides alternatives, competes against mainstream commercial archaeology in a way, to collaborate with communities, and we're all, in a sense, that brings us together as individuals is our passion to step outside the mainstream system and try and create change, right, which is just change that's more equitable and more culturally appropriate, I think, in the way archaeology, anthropology is carried out. And I think a lot of the fields in general are going through a process of decolonisation, and there's much talk about it. The conferences have whole sessions on it. So we're, I guess, working on projects that help contribute to that process in a practical way. So it's about bringing a whole bunch of case studies together to show, alternatives to the way things can be done. So that's what brings our team together, and there's a lot more of us than are here today that want to be involved in that type of project. People that are sort of disillusioned with the way things are, but want to create change and get active. Right. So I think that's what unites us, and where we need to have an integrated team, because you need a collaborative approach to get projects done, but also as a company, in essence, I need different perspectives on how to do things and how to run things. From Bobby and Zach and Tess and all the other people in our team, because we're always learning, educating ourselves in how to do things. So we need that guidance as well. Whereas I think a lot of companies can just have a sort of static approach to things that follow a system and a structure without knowing how to change themselves.
Right.
So that's what brings us together, I guess, in a way, to sort of push for change, but in a positive solution-based approach, not a conflict-based approach.
Mm-hmm. So, Bobby, just curious what this experience has been like for you, being from a different part of the U.S. and seeing both, working with tribes out here, but then also working with Zach and this whole road trip experience, what it's been like for you.
It's been rather interesting. So I guess I got my start in archaeology when I was really young, 12, and we did...
Wow.
So I've been doing archaeology for half my life now.
Yeah.
But my experience was it was community-based archaeology. You had the tribe, they backed up the projects, and the tribe, put on the projects. So in my experience, community-based archaeology was that was archaeology. That's just what you did. And it was interesting seeing the traditional archaeology, what's mainstream archaeology today. So, these type of projects, it's like home. It's just what you do, in my opinion. But so that whole, the road trip hasn't been strange, or the learning process hasn't been, as much it would be for other people, because this is just, it's what you do.
That's awesome. Yeah. That would be nice if we trained a whole generation of archaeologists that was just what you do. We'll get there. Yeah, and I feel like it's happening. I feel like I've been having a lot of conversations lately that have been like some of the things that Dave was touching on about with the disillusionment, with a lot of archaeologists just feeling like they're not really contributing anything, and that ultimately they're part of the problem. And, just having these conversations with recently with a couple of, young archaeologists that are kind of newer to the field, and the fact that the problem is that those are the people that I think a lot of times leave archaeology, and in a lot of ways, those are the kind of people that you want to stay, the people that are concerned about those kinds of issues. For me, I feel like the idea was always, as long as I'm more helpful than I'm hurting, as long as, when the field gets to the point where I'm no longer necessary, which will be an amazing day, then that would be the time to back away. But unfortunately, I don't feel like we're there yet. So what do we do to get there, I guess?
I think it's some of the things what we've been discussing about, that interaction. The best thing is to get outside your comfort zone, outside an area, and go meet community, like if I can land from Australia and go out to Ignacio and to all these places and things like that. And it's just about getting out there, making those first steps, getting to know your local community, your First Nations people, of where you live, where you work, where you raise your family and children. Right. Know whose country, where you're sitting, whose group, what you're sitting on, and try to integrate yourself into that community in the most respectful way. And you'll see that, I've seen it's reciprocated really well. People are the most kind, generous people. It's just about making those first moves. In Australia, we have a similar sort of thing where for what we call Wadila, white man, non-Indigenous people, sometimes it's a bit of a stalemate, which I've seen who's going to move first in that game of chess. Someone's too scared to approach forward, just like as First Nations people are the same. So we kind of stand there and look at each other, or look at each other and then quickly look away, and not sure who's going to do that. So, just make that first step, make that move, and you will be enriched from your spirit to everything.
Right.
This is Tess speaking. So my experience in working with, or the small contribution I make with Applied Archaeology International just makes me feel very hopeful, because my great-grandmother has this teaching that the medicine, which could be the change they are making within their own field, the medicine that they carry is most potent when it's the same medicine. So in other words, they're archaeologists but making change within the archaeology field. And then healing our lineages, forming alliances, and so this whole history of us versus them needs to become and collaboration. I see the transformative process with archaeologists, the love they have for Indigenous peoples' culture, for lack of a better term, but earth-based spirituality. I understand that their non-Indigenous peoples draw to such a natural way of being and living, and so they would want to study it. But the part that I think needs to be amplified is the reverence for the culture. In talking with archaeologists, and it's been tapped on in this conversation, like they feel like they're part of the problem, but there is a solution, okay? And that is that fascination or love that you have for archaeology, just sprinkle some reverence into it.
Stay cool and choose from over 40 in-stock ceiling fans for under $100, plus an 11% rebate at Menards. We carry the largest selection of in-stock Hunter ceiling fans, available in a variety of designs, finishes, and features. Create the perfect look and lighting for any room with a new Hunter ceiling fan. Visit Menards.com and view our entire selection of Hunter ceiling fans, plus the weekly flyer and other great deals going on now.
Save big money at Menards.
Is your vehicle stopping like it should? Does it squeal or grind when you brake? Don't miss out on summer brake deals at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
All right, so I think we could all talk about all of this for a lot longer. I think we all have a lot more that we could say, but we're getting about to the end of time, and I want to make sure everybody has a chance to add any final thoughts. So why don't we go around, and anybody that wants to add anything else, let's have you jump in.
Yeah, I think ultimately about specifically for archaeology and archaeologists, it's just about respect, and that's what the message is wherever we work comes from. Just respect. We're working on a lot of the time other people's heritage and culture and land. So in that instance, there is an obligation to know whose land you're on, and personally, you should know the elders of that area, and that comes down to yourself. You could be working for a company or a university department, but you still have that personal obligation to seek out the elders and the community and introduce yourself and let them know, what your role is here. And I don't think it's a challenge. It's not a challenge that we're putting forward to mainstream archaeology. It's about just shifting the dynamic, the way it's structured, changing the status quo so that there is an understanding that elders and community leaders are in control of projects. And that's going to take time to shift completely, especially in commercial archaeology, but it's happening. So your role as an individual can help make that change happen faster just by reaching out. Like as Zach said, just reach out. And there is a role for archaeology. This isn't about shutting down the system. It's about knowing our place. We shouldn't be leading these projects. We should know our place. We have some skills to offer. People like working with us as archaeologists if it's structured right. There's a position for elders, there's a position for cultural facilitators, there's a position for youth, and then people want projects. Like Bobby's community up in Alaska, they're running a lot of community projects and they're doing a lot of archaeology, and it's a lot more fulfilling type of work. So the challenge for all of us now is just exploring how to take these models, these case studies, and implement them in the government system, in the way that agency systems, in the way they teach it, and also the commercial, the CRM components of our field, how to embed that respectful process into that. That's what we're exploring.
This is Tess speaking. So I just would like to invite listeners and to share this with their family and friends about cultural appropriation, not just in the field of archaeology, but in art and ceremony. Ask that, you learn your own lineages and heal your lineage and not copy or claim other indigenous peoples' cultures, and creating your own ceremony, just having that integrity and dignity. And so my company, Creations Curations, you can find me on a Facebook page, and if you would like more information about healing your own lineage and doing ceremony that's authentic to your heritage, then you can contact me. And I also would like to just mention this book that is just so empowering and profound, written by Kathleen S. Fine-Dare. It's called Grave Injustice. It's the American Indian Repatriation Movement in NAGPRA. And if you're interested in learning more about repatriation and the grave injustices, then this is a great read. Thank you.
Final thoughts and stuff. I think exactly, this is Zach here, just thinking about how you work with your traditional owners, your custodians, your First Nations people coming together and be the change you want to see. Plant the seeds of change, and like I said, you'll be so welcomed within the community. For me on this journey, it's been amazing that the ocean, or Warta, the ocean, separates us, but it doesn't separate us. It's the waters that connect us together and the stories that come with that.
I guess some of my final thoughts are, something that's really important is to, like you said, reach out to your communities, but also reach out to the elders and kind of learn the do's and don'ts of certain things. Not every culture has the same cultural practices, and it's not really cool to, cultural appropriation. It's a big no-no term, but, there's certain things that you can appropriate effectively and efficiently and respectfully. The big thing is respectful appropriation and learning things to protect yourself or protect your family, and those kind of things I would say are really, really big in archaeology, especially when you're dealing with, another person's culture.
Thank you, Jessica, and your team for creating this space to get voices out there and these issues and solutions as part of, in the space for people to hear. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Well, before we close out, I want to add a couple of things. First of all, if you guys haven't seen it already, Simon Fraser University put together a great guide called, I think it's Think Before You Appropriate, or Think Don't Appropriate, or something like that. So we can include that in the show notes as well. It's been on previous episodes, but if you haven't checked it out yet, it's a great guide. Also, I want to add a thought about making sure that when you're reaching out to elders and communities, that you're not adding an extra burden on their plate. So, if you're the one reaching out, you should be the one going to them, not expecting them to come to you. Maybe bring food, like the normal kind of like respectful guest kind of things, and then also, like Bobby said, maybe doing your research ahead of time and figuring out what being a respectful guest looks like. So definitely reach out, but make sure that you're not doing it in a way that you're just adding to their plate. So on that note, thank you all so much for taking time out of your big trip and out of your week and all your work to talk to us and our listeners. So thank you. Thanks for listening to the Heritage Voices podcast. You can find show notes at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com/Heritage Voices. Please subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, or the Google Music Store. Also, if you like the show, please share with your friends. or write us a review. If you have any questions, comments, or show suggestions, please reach out to me at jessica@livingheritageanthropology.org, or you can find me on Facebook through Living Heritage Anthropology or on Twitter @LivingHeritageA. As always, thank you to Lyle Blanqua and Jason Nez for their collaboration on our incredible logo.
This show is produced by the Archaeology Podcast Network, Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle in Reno, Nevada at the Reno Collective.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 US a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to archpodnet.com/members for more info.
What makes for a great vacation? Depends on who you ask. Are you looking to get away or bring everyone together? Do you want to get outside and play or see a play at the plate? Fortunately, however you operate, I'm the destination you've been looking for. The name's Missouri, but you can call me Mo. And I have just one question. What's your MO? Come see me at visitmo.com.
Is your vehicle stopping like it should? Does it squeal or grind when you brake? Don't miss out on summer brake deals at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly.